Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, everyone, and we're glad you can attend Attitude's weekly ADHD Experts webinar. We hope that everyone is staying safe and staying well. A little housekeeping before we get started. If you've listened to one of our webinars before, you know we offer attendees a certificate of attendance. When the webinar ends, a post-event survey will pop up. It will list 3 questions about the quality of the webinar, followed by 3 questions titled Required for Certificate. If you would like a certificate of attendance emailed to you, you should answer those 3 questions. If you don't want a certificate, then obviously don't bother. So today's topic is key to adults and kids. As you know, I'm sure, many people don't really acknowledge the existence of ADHD or that it is even real. This lack of validation and empathy impacts a person's self-esteem, particularly when it is repeated over a lifetime. We all know about feeling less than. Numerous studies have shown that arguing about ADHD ignorance, like other hot topics, actually makes people more entrenched in their opinions. So how can an adult with ADHD and their child effectively make change? Confronting hostility toward and ignorance of ADHD with wit and authenticity can educate naysayers and change minds. Thankfully, we have Rick Green here today to give us perspective and strategies for empowerment and self-esteem. Rick is an award-winning comedy writer, producer, and director. In 2009, he and his wife, Ava, created the groundbreaking program, ADD and Loving It, which, by the way, I love, the TotallyADD.com website, and eventually a PBS sequel, ADD and Mastering It, a dozen full-length programs on ADHD. You can ask questions of Rick during the presentation, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can after he finishes. If you want to download the slides of this webinar, click the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources on the bottom left of your screen. If you do not see the Event Resources tab, you need to refresh the page. That all being said, let's get to the webinar. Thanks, Rick, for being here, and we appreciate your making sense of all this for us.
Oh, I didn't say I'd make sense of it. It could get messy. Thank you, Wayne. And thanks to Lily, who has been working behind the scenes to make all of this happen. Thanks to everybody who is attending. Welcome. This is a hot topic to the point where I could argue that TotallyADD.com and the PBS specials and the dozen or whatever it is number of other videos in our shop all were because when I got the diagnosis, I was attacked, I was dismissed, it was denied, I was sneered at, it was a joke, it wasn't a problem, you're on television. And my reaction to that was, well, we're going to go through some of the things that I tried that didn't necessarily work all that well. And what I have found does work in doing reading about human psychology and in listening to some of the best experts in the world talk and watching them slowly dismantle the stigma. It's been brilliant. So we are going to talk about ADHD. And as I say, I'm here because when I got diagnosed, there was this pushback. So I made ADD and Loving It, and then the network, the television network that we were working for at the time said you should probably build a website, and we did, and that within weeks, people were writing to say, you just saved my life. I had bought drugs to kill myself, like literally the difference. And so what we thought was going to be a one-off project, and then we'd go back to comedy series became full-time. And what moved me the most, what made me the saddest was that people were coming at 2 a.m. and communicating with each other in the forums and sharing because they had said, I found this website or I've seen this film. I think I have ADHD. And one guy said, my wife said, oh, George, you don't have ADHD. You're just stupid. And my daughter yelled, yeah, not even dad. Yeah, George, you're just stupid. And so he'd gotten up in the middle of the night and was now sharing his story. So all of this was so frustrating for me because I could see the difference that knowing and dealing with it was making for me and for my son, who got diagnosed before I did. Familiar story. So we're going to talk about how to defend your diagnosis. We live in a time, as you may have noticed, where people have strong opinions. The world is really a polarized one. My point of view is right, and that's political, that's religious, that's social, economic, you name it, whatever it is. Even people will almost come to blows over which is the best Star Wars. Like there just is no middle ground. There's no, yeah, maybe, could be, I don't know, or I stand corrected. None of that anymore. We're overwhelmed with information. So this is a real problem for all of us, that there is so much to know. When I was young, I never lost my phone. It was on the wall in the kitchen. Now we got to know a whole bunch of stuff. And even just to use my phone, the amount of stuff I have to know, it's great that it does all these things, but I've got to sit down and figure out how they work or ask someone, and then I'll forget an hour later or 2 hours later, unless I use it again 3 times in the next hour, and then it may be in there. So we're overwhelmed with information. And as well, we are dealing with a lot of snake oil cures. Everybody's got an opinion, and I'm sure you've heard it. Oh, there's a doctor in Seattle who's curing it with seaweed. Yeah, maybe. And then you go to his website, say symptoms have been reduced. It's like, what are the symptoms? Well, the hyperactive rocking. Yeah, this is called a straitjacket. It will reduce the symptoms of ADHD. Great. It doesn't, it's a symptom, right? Anyway, don't get me started. Well, it's too late. I'm started. We're here and I'm started. And so you've encountered this, I'm sure. Oh, everybody knows about, or I heard. Yeah, I heard. And well, they say, they being who, of course. So as I said, this is not really a time of people being willing to agree to disagree. We are so stressed right now about everything, and the pandemic has added to that. But on some level has also, I think, toned things down. Some people are finding peace and quiet and embracing that and exploring it and so on, because there's nobody they can tell, what I think too, unless they want to get online. But we are living in a time where we're revved all the time. We are told what we need to wear, what we need to dress. I mean, that's been going on for 2 centuries probably, but we are so overwhelmed with information, with opinions, with things we should know. If you're a parent, my parents read Dr. Spock, the book, and that was probably just my mom reading it. Now you're just constantly checking, and the news just pumps that up. And we'll have this headline plus the item in your kitchen that could kill all your children and every child in the world and every house pet. And then, of course, that's left right till the end. And then they say, at the end, it's this 10-pound box of detergent. If you drop that on someone, it'll kill them, whatever. So long before the term clickbait, the networks were, and everybody, the media, were making their living by frightening us. And my simple recommendation, if you're stressed, is, and this is really hard to do because it's addictive, but turn off the news. And you say, well, I want to be informed. Do you feel informed? It's like I'm concerned about road safety. Great. Here's 150 pictures of bodies lying on the road from car accidents. You're not learning anything, and you're not going to be empowered to go out and champion. You're going to be horrified and stuck with images and so on. So just a piece of advice. I'm not saying you have to tune out forever, but try it for an hour, a week, a month, see what happens. Anyway, the reason I recommend this is that we do get triggered. We can get triggered very easily by what people say. I love you have such strong opinions about ADHD, but you can't name the 2 subtypes or any of the 18 symptoms. So this is really frustrating. As I say, this is what got me going. I got triggered again and again and again. And I, at the time, was really not good at staying calm. We can also be hypersensitive. And yeah, I had that one. We tend to overreact. In fact, one of the videos on our website in the shop is about emotional sensitivity, but it's also physical sensitivity, noise, people, loud places, light touch, whatever. So we are hypersensitive. This is not just about, as you probably know, this is not just about managing our attention. It is about managing everything going into our brains, which is why we can be so clumsy. You should see some of my toes, the bent, and sensory input. This is why I realized later, probably 10 years after I was diagnosed, this is why I hate going to the beach, because the sand gets everywhere and it's too much for my brain. It drives me nuts. So we come across as mercurial, where we can be overly emotional. We have all of these traits, and none of us have all of these traits. And what happens is when you start to realize you have this, or you get a proper diagnosis, or your child gets a diagnosis, or your best friend says, you know what, I found out about me, and I think you should look into it, you will face a lot of prejudice. It's not as bad as it used to be, I have to say, but it's still out there. And people will say it's a load of nonsense, and they'll offer all kinds of facts that prove that it can't possibly be you. It's all just made up by big pharma companies. It's just lazy parents or liberal parents or bad parents, liberal apparently meaning bad. There's no such thing as ADHD this is a great one. There's no such thing as ADHD when I was her age, right? And there was no such thing as PTSD. Does that mean everybody in the First World War and the Second World War was fine? No, they didn't have a name for it. Anyway, sorry, we'll get into how to rebut later. So they also feel like it's just an excuse to get drugs and so on. So there's all of these different things that you'll heard 100 different things about why it's not real or it's really rare. And it kind of is. The question to ask is, well, it doesn't really matter what others think. Maybe to some people it doesn't, but to me, I found that it was really upsetting. It really threw me. It made me doubt my diagnosis, getting all this negativity to the point where I had to struggle with it for a while. It threw me off track in moving forward. It undermined my self-esteem. Yeah, maybe I am just lazy. And now I'm waffling between, am I lazy? Am I stupid? Am I self-centered? Which I could be. I'm not saying I'm not. But maybe there's another explanation I can actually do something about. Because, what is it? The comedian Ron White says you can't fix stupid. So I am not going to deal with that. Anyway, so it underlines your trust in your diagnosis. Oops. And sorry, I'm jumping backwards. And what I've discovered for myself, but especially from other people who've told me, is that one casual, thoughtless remark, oh, you don't need to be on medication, can completely destroy someone's progress. Maybe I don't, because we're sensitive. It's not like the analogy everyone used with a broken leg. You can see it. It's not like that. How do you see it? And of course, there's that phrase of everybody has those problems. Yeah, to the point, not to this point. And so all of this, you've got a limited amount of energy and willpower to deal with your ADHD, and you just don't want to waste it arguing with everybody, arguing with the world. The other problem with it not being rebutted or debunked is that the myths get to live on and on and on. Now, I'm not suggesting it's your job to try and break all the myths and educate everybody, but that is a side effect. The main thing I want you to be able to do is defend yourself, protect yourself, and avoid this stuff. Oops, sorry, down we go. Okay, so let's jump. So there are reasons that people will give you. One is, I can't have ADHD because I don't have some of the symptoms, and nobody has all of the symptoms. And that surprises me still. The number of people said, yeah, I saw the list, but there were 3 things there I didn't have. 3 out of 18. Well, the threshold for kids is 12 for the combined subtype would be 6 out of 9 and 6 out of 9 for the inattentive and the hyperactive impulsive side. So, and for adults, 5 out of 9, or even saying 4 out of 9 if it's causing problems. My whole family's like this, and now we know why, because of the genes, and we'll talk more about that. I'm not hyperactive. Yeah, and this is often why girls have been missed. And my son, I think, was missed because they're predominantly inattentive. They're not necessarily hyperactive, at least not visibly. And then there's, my doctor said it's depression, which it could well be. It's depressing to live a life not knowing why you mess everything up, and nobody else seems to mess everything up. And I say seems to because a number of people who are struggling with their finances. But anyway, all right. And then there's, I'm doing okay. I'm unsuccessful. My mom said, "What are you talking about? You're on national television." And I thought, yeah, so are a lot of murderers, on the news. Just getting on television is not that hard. Anyway, I only thought of that on the way home so this is why partly I'm doing this, so you're prepared, so you don't come up with your great rebuttal on the way home. And then these are three more that, I can focus on stuff I like, or more often it's, he can focus just fine when it's something he likes. Well, we can hyperfocus, and I can hyperfocus on sorting paper clips, but it's not necessarily something I like. It's an easy challenge, and it feels rewarding because it's colored paper clips. So, and then, we can tell ourselves I'm lazy. I hate doing boring stuff without asking, what does boring mean to us? It means it's not triggering neurochemical response. And then there's this other, I may have it, but I'm okay. And by that, I mean, that's different from earlier in the sense that it's more about I've abandoned it. I've stopped trying. I've given up. I just don't do that anymore. And that's a shame, because what can happen, as I found, is once I had the diagnosis, it was like, I'm going to try, and I started on a stimulant medication for a while. I'm going to try doing my taxes. And I could do my taxes. I was then alarmed that I was no longer a funny comedian, but that turned out not to be true at all. I was just a more organized comedian who wasn't being fined for their taxes late. So, there is this, I'm doing okay, but so often it means it's code for I'm getting by. I throw this in just because this is how I kind of looked at it when I started reading the list of symptoms. And you'll hear this from grandparents or dads especially. It's just a chip off the old block. Yeah, because he's inherited those genes. And as we'll see in a little while, there's 106 genes that have been identified as suspects for ADHD, which is why not everybody looks alike, because we all have different combinations switched on and off. So this can be infuriating. What people don't get is what Lady Gaga said, which is we're born this way. And so we're left with this feeling of constantly being questioned. And the things that people say, I want to point this out, they're true to some extent. People say, well, everybody struggles with these symptoms. Yeah. And what I say to people, have you ever lost your keys 6 times in one day? And then the 6 times the next day, and that gets them. That's when they get it. So people say, oh, there's these lousy doctors out there. There are lousy doctors out there. It's bad parenting. You may know some bad parents. It's pharma companies. They don't have a spotless record. Lazy teachers. Think back to when you were in school. Were they all great? No. It's overdiagnosed. Last I heard, it was in one southern state, 11% of kids had a diagnosis. And oddly, in that state, schools got extra money for extra staff if they had kids with ADHD. So there was a financial incentive. And so it probably is overdiagnosed. And it's radically, among adults, underdiagnosed. And doctors are handing out meds like candy. I remember going to a barber who would give me candy. I've never seen a doctor handing that out. But yeah, sure, there are doctors who are on the take, who are, So all these things, yeah, there are examples. There's headlines now and then. Doctor caught, they're writing prescriptions for whatever. So they are true, some of these things, partly. And that's worth acknowledging, as we'll see. Okay, let's jump to the next one. And that's me that makes it jump. Then there are the myths that are just nonsense, like it's too much sugar, artificial sweeteners, video games. Are just reading about a study they did on video games. They had kids who played a lot, and a percentage of them had ADHD, and the ones who didn't have ADHD, they studied them over time, and then they made them stop playing, and they checked the kids who didn't have ADHD after playing a lot of video games did not have ADHD. The rate didn't increase. And then there's this one. I've heard this, the internet, which doesn't help. Let's face it, we can all get lost there. We all know that, whether we have ADHD or not. But I blame the parents who'd rather drug their kids. So I was working on a project, nothing to do with ADHD, and somebody said, without looking at me, said, so what do you think about parents who just, would rather give their kids drugs than deal with the problem? And I said, well, think of 10 couples who have kids, or single parents who have kids. And of those 10, what percentage are casual about giving their kids psychotropic medications? Among them, who would say, just give them these drugs that are really controversial rather than try diet and special and. No. Any doctor will tell you the last thing that parents want is to start medication. It's the last thing a lot of adults want. So I said that, and he sat there for a while. He was working on something with his hands, and this little smile came across his face, and he finally looked me in the eye and said, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Huh. Switched him around. So that was an interesting, whereas before, 10 years ago, it would not have gone that way. I would have been a little more attack. And that is so let's talk about strategies. How do you respond? How do I respond? Number one is fight back. You can refute, rebut, demolish their statement with facts. I could have almost said the exact same thing, but are you kidding? Do you know any parents who would rather give their kid a psychotropic medication, one that's surrounded with controversy, which is needless, by the way? And then, give the history of the disorder. German doctors were describing this back in the 1800s. Or I could get into famous folks that have ADHD, and so on and so on. The effectiveness I've found of this strategy is about 1 in 10. Nobody wants to be attacked. Nobody wants to be made fun of. Some people may need it, not often, but more often than not, when I've responded this way, it was actually somebody just asking because they're concerned, because they have kids, because their nephew or niece went to a terrible doctor and didn't do well on medication, or their brother did, or whatever has happened. So fighting back, not good. Number 2, play dumb. So this one I like when somebody, and this I would use in front of if someone's being really obnoxious. So you're at a party and someone, that ADHD, it's way overdiagnosed. And what I would say is, really? By how much? How much is it overdiagnosed? Like, what percentage of kids are diagnosed, and what is the actual figure that it should be? Well, I don't know, but and it's been interesting because when someone throws that thing out there, you can see people nodding and agreeing. And then when you just ask them for the specifics, so what are the numbers on that? Sounds like you've done a lot of research. Are you, in fact, a medical researcher? I don't say that, but there can be a nasty tone underneath. But it's just simply, it's way overdiagnosed. Really, by how much? And just wait. And it helps to know a few facts and say, because among kids, it's about 7%, 5 to 7%, say 5%, 1 in 20 kids. And among adults, it's maybe 4%, conservatively. What percentage are diagnosed? Do you know? So that can work. If someone's being deliberately confrontational, I just like to leave them. It's like the Wile E. Coyote going off the edge of the cliff, and it pops the bubble. That one I would give a 4 out of 10. You have to use it sparingly, but playing dumb can be good. Seeking a bit of clarification is similar but better. So I don't believe in ADHD. I don't think it's real. I think it's just a made up thing. It's just lazy parents, and the pharma companies are all getting in there, and every kid today, and there's nothing. They're not letting kids be kids, and they give them these Yeah. What about DRD 4.7? Blah, 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 blah. What? DRD 4.7. What's that? Well, that was the first gene that was identified as being a suspect for ADHD. The D stands for dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that is the main culprit in ADHD, low levels of dopamine. So what about DRD 4.7, which was back in 1989, I think it was, at the University of California, Irvine was where that was first did. Now, I wrote this in one of my blogs, this strategy, recommending it. And 3 days later, a woman said, OMG, was at a bar and some guy said, I don't believe in ADHD, because somebody mentioned that she had ADHD. And I said, what about DRD 4.7? And he said, what's that? And I explained, and he said, I stand corrected. I stand corrected. When was the last time you heard anybody in this world we're living in right now say, I stand corrected? Not just, yeah, okay, fine, I'll self-isolate, but I stand corrected. So this one, I like the strategy. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 for that. So just asking, and it requires you to know DRD 4.7, which is I've managed to memorize, as you can tell. All right. Conceding a point that may be true. This is a great way to start. It's just these, it's just lazy teachers. Yeah, I had a couple of teachers that were just, but I had like 3 or 4 who were amazing. And actually, the teacher that my daughter has, she is fun. But you start with, oh yeah, there is. Or yeah, some college kids are faking ADHD to try and get the medication, which is unfortunate because the people who need it, I don't know if you knew this, but the people who need it, the kids who really benefit from this, where it levels the playing field and it gives them a fighting chance, those kids now really struggle to get medication. They run out. They can't get a renewal. The universities are so strict, some of them. It's just brutal. And it's because of these kids who don't have it, who are faking it to get the drugs, which is a shame, because the kids who do it, and I could go on, and I sometimes do, as you can tell. That one's an 8 out of 10. Starting with just conceding is great. I'm going to take it a step further, though, and this is my best strategy, I think. If you're going to rebut anything, it's the been there, done that. So I think it's just lazy kids. I think it's just sugar in the diet. That's exactly what I thought, man. I thought it's our food. The diet is so bad. And yet what happens is you have 4 kids, 2 have ADHD, 2 don't, in the same house, same family. They're eating the same diet. It's not sugar, apparently, But that's exactly, if you can catch that phrase when someone says something that is wrong or ignorant or half true, you could just, you know what? It's exactly what I thought. And they are so validated, and you're agreeing with them. And then, and you don't have to put it this way, but I found out some damn facts. You come back with it. And then I found out, believe it or not, it's actually a neurotransmitter level, whatever you want to get into. Well, then I just found out it's actually brain chemistry, and the images of the brains, they're actually wired differently and working differently. And just that may be enough. And that brings me to the final point. So love that one, by the way. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. That's exactly what Susan and I thought. You know what? That's what we all think. I think that's what everybody's been told, blah, blah, blah. That one's 9 out of 10. That almost always works. Or at least it's hard for people to come back because you've just agreed with them. And this one, I'm not, if you're uncomfortable confronting people, you could just say nothing. You can just nod. You might counter with you might be right, which drives people nuts. I know I'm right. You might be right. And they're waiting for more. And you're willing to leave it that there could be right. And here's the challenge, or why this can be effective, is nobody likes uncertainty. I don't know. How did the universe get started? Well, we've got to create a story of whatever. And everybody will have a different story depending on where they're from and so on. So that saying nothing or just you could be right and leaving it there is infuriating for people, which can be, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, because once they get infuriated, it's very hard to get them to convince anyone of anything. So that one is where'd it go? It's a 10 out of 10. It works. You never blurt out anything. The phrase I heard once that I love is, "You're not the idiot whisperer." I thought, oh, that's a great, and they're not idiots. They're just ignorant. They just aren't aware. They haven't been exposed to the facts. So the other thing that I'm going to jump ahead here just to check my notes here, make sure. Yeah. You also have to give folks time to process change. I can tell you from my own experience and a lot of people's other experience that the folks who were most resistant early on have become some of my biggest supporters. The people who are dismissive of it are often, it's because they have it themselves. I'll talk about that in a moment, but that is another issue. Because we come into the world wired this way, most of us are born with this genetic loading for this. It's very easy to assume that everybody else has it. I certainly did. I thought everybody struggled with their taxes. Everybody was late. Everybody was losing stuff all the time. I didn't get it because it was my experience. And I looked at my dad. I just assumed, yeah, this is kind of standard for humans because it's all I knew. And it wasn't until I started dealing with it, especially when I started on a stimulant medication for a while and saw the world very differently and saw that I could sit down and do things I could not do before. That was astounding to me. So I realized it didn't change. Well, I don't want to get into an ad for medication, but it was helpful for me in seeing that it's not who I am. Another issue that I think is worth addressing is when you give people time to process, and because we are slow to change. You'll have people argue with you and then they go kind of quiet because they've read an article and they looked online and they found somebody else and they say, oh, my cousin here thinks he has ADHD. And then they get some facts from somebody who isn't you, or they see a program on TV or find a website or an article or somebody, celebrity, Channing Tatum or whoever. So many people now are open about their ADHD. And it's like, okay. Oh, okay. And then quietly they start coming around, but they're never going to say, you know what? I was wrong. You were right. All right. So let's jump down. The other thing I want you to remember is that not everybody is arguing with you to try and hurt or humiliate you. That took me a long time to realize. And there are a lot of scary sounding myths about ADHD. So people have a right to be concerned. There is real abuse of medications. ADHD ones are difficult to abuse, but medication, with the whole opioids and stuff, people are just really concerned about medication. And so they're concerned. If you can look at it this way, they are often concerned about your welfare or your child's welfare. And then, as I say, there are the people who get the ADHD diagnosis and start the medication. I'll let you read that. It's actually not priceless. It's painful. Realizing you completely dismissed ADHD and have always called your son lazy. Priceless. Painful. The number of people, parents who have said, oh my God, if only we'd known. In fact, in our medication video, a lovely woman talks about when she got the diagnosis and her parents saying to her, if only, and she was like 25, I think, or 30. Yeah, she was 30 when she got the diagnosis. And she said, they just looked at me and said, we could have avoided a decade of pain, suffering, struggle, drama, and so on. So, as I say, sometimes you just want to wait for people to come around, and those people can become your staunchest ally. So you want to leave the door open for them to be able to come back to you and say, I read this article. You know what? I didn't think there was. And then you can be generous. You got to be generous with people, right? You just got to come back with, yeah, I know. That's what I thought too. It's what everybody thinks. If you can be generous, you'll make a difference for other people. So a couple of final 2 or 3 suggestions. One is rehearse your response. Find somebody to throw the worst stuff, the stuff that triggers you. Make a list, if you want, of the phrases that trigger you, and have somebody throw them at you. Do some role playing, or just stand in front of the mirror and say them out loud, and then just feel the activation. You're the one actually saying it, and you'll find yourself getting activated because the memories will come back. And then just practice being calm and going, you know what? That's exactly what I thought. Just practice and rehearse, because our go-to situation with our amygdala charged and the fight or flight going on is to defend ourselves, because it is an attack, or it can feel like an attack. Another suggestion, and this is the 106 genes I was mentioning, but to have some information to be able to defend your diagnosis. And then another suggestion is to ask them to read an article, to watch a video, skim a symptom checklist, take a quiz online. There's a lot of them around. We have a couple. But if you sit down with someone, does this sound like me? It takes it off of them. And they may be the ones who actually listen to the list and go, oh my God, that is you. That's ADHD. Yeah. And so you can come with it that way. Sitting and watching a video with someone, a short one or a long one, can be hugely powerful, because it's not you offering the opinion. It's Dr. Alwell, it's Dr. So-and-so, it's whoever. So that's the other thing, is to just refer to it, send an article to somebody and say, does this sound like me? Or does this sound like Dad? And so on. So that kind of brings us to the end of what I want to say. So I'll quickly review. Making people wrong is our go-to reaction, our default reaction, just because of the way humans are wired, and it doesn't really work. It's not effective in this. It might be in a knife fight, but it's not when you're trying to talk about ADHD. And so that would be my suggestion, is rehearse what you're going to say, have a little bit of information, and if need be, just vow ahead of time that whatever anyone says, you're just going to let it go for now, until you're in a better space, until you're more certain of your diagnosis, or you can react in a way that is helpful and not reactive and doesn't make them feel wrong. Because we have this trait called cognitive dissonance, and the more you argue with someone, the more entrenched they have to become. And so this famous example I remember is they took 3 groups of adults, and they showed the first group a video about a health film. This was many years ago, about dental hygiene. By brushing, you eliminate the bacteria. The second group, they showed them, this is what decay looks like. These are bleeding. This is what the pain, this can happen, and your heart can get the bacteria. And was quite the third one was, here's what it does to your gums. Here's rotting, like horrifying. And guess which group modified? The people who saw the most horrible stuff didn't change their behavior. The people who saw the slightly horrifying stuff, some changed their behavior a little. The people who saw here's the facts, they were the ones who made changes to their dental regimen or their dental hygiene. So there you are. If you can find a way to be that way and be that for someone else, you get to save their life, and they may get to save someone else's, and so on and so on and so on. Thank you very much. I think we're at the end, Wayne.
Yes, we have some questions. That was excellent. Excellent,
oh,
Rick,
thank you.
And entertaining and eye-opening. When you talk about having, several people have asked, how can you remember the studies and statistics when you're involved in a conversation with someone? Should you have Post-it cards or sticky notes, or do you have any strategies for remembering this, or just keep rehearsing it?
No, if you're good with memory, sure. I mean, DRD 4.7, it rolls off my tongue now, so I've got it. But I would I'd have a piece of paper and have it on my wall and say, you know what, that's exactly what I thought, but listen to this, and pull it out. Uh-huh. Or, just say, you know what, there's a quiz. Take a look at this. Here's the actual list of symptoms. This is the, whatever website or whatever. But, it's hard to remember the statistics, and you can just say, the other thing I would do is, in preparation for this, start gathering resources. Create a Word document or any kind of document. And every time you find a great article about ADHD or a video or a program, whatever, write down or copy and paste the URL. So, and, the sleep with ADHD medication, whatever the topics are. So you can say, you know what, let me get back to you. And as soon as you get home, you look at your list and you fire off the article to them.
Right.
Be prepared for them to go, well, articles could say anything, science could say, and so on. But just, you're right, they could be, but here's another study.
Right.
And another.
Oh, I like that strategy. Yeah. Just be out front with it. Have it on a piece of paper. Don't even try to.
Yeah, just say, one of the symptoms is I got terrible memory. Like I can tell you, I can sing almost every Beatles song, and I can't remember my son-in-law's middle name or whatever.
Right.
There's something charming about being that way, about disarming. If someone says you're lazy, go, oh, you think, or, you're always disorganized. You think this is bad. If you got a story that's 10 times worse, you win them over instantly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This woman is a new teacher and newly diagnosed with inattentive ADHD. She'd like to share her struggles and receive training, but she's afraid of the stigma of even raising the fact that she has ADHD, I guess, in the school and possibly not being rehired. So have you run into people who are hiding it because of the fallout from the general public?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a video in our shop called To Tell or Not to Tell about disclosure. And I think there's probably 15 experts in there. And the consensus among them is disclose carefully. There's, I've forgotten who it is that in the video says, all the king's horses and all the king's men can't put Humpty together again. Once it's out there, you can't take it back. The suggestion, first of all, is to just bring up the topic casually. What do we think of ADHD? Or I read this thing that adults can have ADHD. And if everybody, oh, what a load of, or are you kidding? My cousin and I had done that. You can feel that out just by offer. I read something or I saw this or whatever. The second thing is I would disclose the symptoms that are the most severe, the ones that are, if there's a symptom, and David Gawerk, the founder of the, one of the big training academies, among other things, he talks about his going to his boss and just saying, I'm terrible with paperwork. If you hire someone to do my invoicing, I'll triple my sales. And he was working for a big ad agency and sports venues. And it was a big amounts of money involved. And his boss went, thought it over. A clerk, I don't know what that salary is, and he's going to double his business, the amount he brings in. He actually ended up tripling it. His boss was very pleased. So it's sometimes you can find ways to say, I really do well if I can have the, less recess duty, maybe it is, or whatever it would be. But it's figuring out a solution that would work for you. I think that, and offering, I'm not good at this. I tell people I'm terrible with names and faces, but I remember what people have said. So I hope that helps, but it is disclosing is really tricky. The other way to avoid disclosing is to start dealing with your ADHD and focus on one or two traits with one or two strategies. Don't adopt 30, we get enthusiastic, but just one, try it for a week or two or a month. And mindfulness or any of those things and see what happens. Because then you may even have people around you going, yeah, you seem a lot more whatever these days. Yeah, you've got an opening to talk about it. And maybe you never tell people. You just, that's the other issue that's raised is who needs to know.
Right.
If you got a nasty sister-in-law who's got an opinion on everything, guess who's never going to find out that you have ADHD? And maybe not your brother who's married to her. Not that that was my situation, but yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I say it wasn't my situation. No,
it wasn't. Okay.
My family were a little, but a lot of them were like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
This woman is asking, it's a mom and a wife. She fully believes her kids and husband have ADHD. I guess there wasn't a formal diagnosis yet, but she doesn't know how to support them, especially when they make mistakes or forget things or don't attend to a chore. And she's wondering how she should approach someone. She doesn't have ADHD, how she should approach it so she doesn't alienate them and also shows her love and doesn't just complain about things. So any challenge thoughts there?
I should get my wife in the room for this one. So my wife still gets upset, and getting upset is not the end of the world. It's okay to be upset. We are. Things happen, we get upset. That's because we're human and we feel things. And sometimes that upset gets turned into action, and that's a good thing. That's where ADD and loving it came from. And totally ADD all came from being really upset and feeling awful and lying in bed at night, stewing about it and muttering. It's ugly. So the thing, I think, one of the things is to look at your husband and your child and know they're doing the best they can. You got to get that you don't have ADHD, so it's hard. I get it. But if you want a sense of it, go get 3 or 4 radios and a CD player or gather up everybody's phone and get them all to play a different radio station or a podcast at once. Walk around for a couple hours trying to do things and remembering what you're supposed to be doing while that's going on. And you'll have you may have compassion already just knowing they're struggling, but that will give you a sense of how frustrating it can be. And to know that that's going on 24/7. Now for you, it just means you may have to let go of certain expectations. There's parts of our house that are messy, and my wife is okay with that. And there's parts of her stuff is messy in places now. She's kind of relaxed into it as well. And then there's the whole thing about figuring out what your priorities are, what matters. We just had a death in the family in the last week, and that really gives you a shift in your priorities about what matters and so on. So I'm not encouraging you to go through that, but it is, if you can laugh about it, if you can laugh about it, and if they do something wrong, and if they forget something, it's like, oh, you're always, if you can find a way to turn around, you're always somewhere wonderful in your head, or you're so full of, what are you thinking about? If you can find ways to go there.
Yeah.
You can just say, you forgot the garbage again. And I get it, because, Wednesday is hockey practice and so on. And there's just slips. How do we make sure that this doesn't happen? What can we do? So, the simple example for me is my phone and my keys and wallet. We got this really beautiful old ashtray on a stand, like you'd have in an old, 1940s hotel lobby. And everything goes in that when I walk in the door. And it's ugly in a way because it's sitting right there in the hallway. We tried moving it so it was out of sight. And I walked right by it. And my wallet and everything just got put down everywhere because now it all goes in. It's right there. It's visible. And then the other thing is just encouraging people, just being positive when they manage to get something right. And I have to tell you, we are so battered from being yelled at or for being reminded of what we haven't done. And that, for me, is nothing compared to what's going on up here, you idiot. You let your wife down. You let your child down. What kind of father, what kind of blah, 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 blah. That can just be, it's killer. Mm-hmm. And so when we find someone who loves us for who we are and not who they would like us to be or what would be easier, and that's hard to do, believe me, we are incredibly loyal. When my wife acknowledges that I've cleaned up the kitchen, I beam. I got misty-eyed the first few times, and now I just like cleaning up the kitchen. I just like and I'm busy thinking of ideas and funny memes to create or whatever, and I'm getting the kitchen cleaned up. But part of it is I know that Ava is going to come down and go, oh, thank you. Because I also know she's doing all the cooking, so it's in my own self-interest.
Yeah. I love that ashtray that you talked about.
Yeah, it's really something.
Here's a person, I'm surprised, actually, I've seen 3 questions like this. How does one handle situations where someone's criticism, someone else's, has provoked you to be emotionally upset, dysregulation, and one is struggling to communicate in a calm and coherent manner, but while being upset? So one is wondering, basically how to control your emotional responses.
Well, first thing you can do is notice that you're upset and be able to disconnect, because then you go from, and this is why it's so helpful when a therapist or a friend or anyone says, "You're really upset, aren't you?" And you then go from being upset to checking in. Yeah, I am. You're now in a completely different headspace. I'm not upset. I'm analyzing and noticing and so on. So part of it is just, sorry, I get so upset about this, and it's silly and it's ridiculous. I know, but just give me a minute. Or, you know what? It might even be just, sorry, I get so upset about this. Don't worry about it. Let's talk about something else. As I say, it's not your job to change everybody or to educate the world. But you can move things forward. Some people have bought our videos and donated them to schools or given them to friends or whatever. There are ways to pay it forward. And there was a point where 70, 80% of people in North America smoked, and it ain't that high now. It's down. You may never get everybody to stop smoking. You may never convince everybody that ADHD is real, but you want to get to a tipping point. And with kids, we got there. With adults, we're starting to now, but it's still 3/4 of adults with ADHD are undiagnosed. Right. And I think you got to be aware that you've got a hair trigger for emotion, but that's okay. That can make you an amazing person. It can make you very empathetic, if you channel it the right way, it can make you a great therapist or a wonderful friend or a kind person. They say so often that people with ADHD make great therapists or social workers, because we know what it's like to be not understood and to struggle and to not know why. So I don't know if that answers the question. It does. Exactly. But,
yes. Okay. It answered it for me. I hope it answered it for the attendee.
It's only you, Wayne, we care about anyway.
All right. What is the most negative aspect, going to get personal here, for you about your ADHD diagnosis? Do you think that an earlier diagnosis would have affected your life? And if yes, in which way? There's a lot there.
Yeah. So an earlier diagnosis would have made a difference. But, I was born in the early 50s. So back then, ADHD was called minimal brain dysfunction. And I was kind of quiet and shy. So I slipped under the radar, straight C student, now and then a B. And that was caused when my brothers were getting straight A's. So it was very easy to develop a story that I'm the black sheep of the family, that I'm not as bright as my brothers, that I'm not everything as my brothers are. So knowing that sooner might have made a difference for me. I studied physics at university. I'm not sure if I would have done that, except I have enough of the Asperger stuff going on that I was drawn to that. But I think everything would change the minute everything starts to shift. I think I'd have very different self-esteem, and I probably would have hired someone sooner to start handling my finances and trusted them to. And so innumerable ways. The biggest way that it's messed with me, I think it's just the consistency, the good intentions. I'm going to get in shape, and I do for a while. I'm going to eat better, and I do for a while. So it's that consistency. And when you overreact and you have you fall off the wagon, if you will, and miss a yoga in the morning. If I don't do it one morning, then it's really likely I won't do it the next morning. And that'll probably turn into 3. And then by the fourth, I'll be hurting so much, I'll actually want to go do it because I'm starting to feel like the Tin Man without having done the yoga. So yeah, it's affected me. And it's affected me in so many ways. I've been through a divorce. And I think, I just always felt like an outsider. I felt a little weird. And on the other hand, if I didn't have that, if I'd been diagnosed early and been accepted, would I have made the documentary? Would 5-10 million people, however many people have seen ADD and Levy, would I be here talking about this? So it's. I have to say I'm really good at looking back, and I have to catch myself and go, here's where I am today. Am I doing my yoga this morning or not? I'm doing my yoga this morning. And on one of the podcasts I was hosting recently, or webinars that we do, we talked about this idea of do the next right thing. And somebody said it's actually from Frozen, the Disney film. But doing the next right thing, rather than worrying about everything and what happened and what could have been and who I should have this and could I have saved my marriage or could I, what's the next right thing? Put away the dishes. Do the yoga. Stretch for 5 minutes. Bring Ava's breakfast in bed. I bring her breakfast in bed every morning. Although she makes the oatmeal the night before, and then so I'm kind of delivering breakfast more than
right.
You know what I mean?
That's excellent advice. Really, I mean it. I mean, that's some inspiring stuff. The Frozen quote. Yeah, I really like
love that.
Yeah,
and it's so powerful. And if you could draw upon that when someone's coming at you with you people, it's all your and in my day we didn't have that. We got the strap. And a part of you can just go, what's the next right thing? Maybe it's just to walk away, or maybe it's to go. And so you would like kids to get strapped. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Because
here's
you suffer.
Last one.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to try to fit this in. How do you respond to the loaded question? This is someone saying this to you. How can you lead others when you can't even lead yourself? How do you sort of process that or handle it? Or is that too difficult in just 3 minutes? I don't know. No,
I think what you do is you grab them and you just shake it. Or alternatively, you say, Richard Branson has ADHD. He can't add up. He also has something called dyslexia, and he has something called dyscalculia. He can't add up a column of 2-digit numbers, but he has people who do. He's had all kinds of business failures and some stunning business successes. So how can I lead others? Well, Winston Churchill apparently had ADHD. That's where it's handy to have a list that you can rhyme off of people who have ADHD. Steven Spielberg, you'll find lists of people, although you have to be cautious because sometimes it's just dyslexia that they have and somebody's pushed them into ADHD. And then the other thing you could say is, I don't know, maybe because I'm not judging people like other people. And throw it right back at them. It's just, I depends on how it comes at you. It's just, I'm sorry, I don't have your great personality and warmth and so on, but somehow it seems to be working. Or a good question. I don't know, but whenever.
Yeah.
You got to be aware that there are people, there's this thing called family homeostasis. So when you go home for Thanksgiving, you probably sit in the chair you sat in growing up. And that everybody wants everything. Rick's the funny one. Michael's the outgoing one. Andy's the smart one. Bob's everybody is what they are. And Carol's always like that. That's our Carol. Ha, ha, ha. We like people to be the way they are. And when they change suddenly, we don't like that. And it's not just people who don't have ADHD. This is human nature. We just don't like it. It's, oh, wow. It's why sometimes if someone's lost a lot of weight, so people go, wow, you lost a lot of weight, rather than what you would expect, which is, oh, wow, you've lost a lot of weight. Because what's going on is nothing to do with the person who lost the weight. It's the person who's going, oh, damn, geez, they look great. And I didn't. And I had those chips last night. By the way, I had chips today. Whatever. So the other thing about that is when someone comes at you like that, It's never about you. It is never about you. If it was about you, everybody would say the exact same thing, right?
Right.
So very often, this is a great clue into what's going on for people. If someone says, we got the strap, it's like, man, they're still hanging on to that. That's obviously a powerful, humiliating moment for them. I was given the strap once, and it was powerfully humiliating, and I still remember it. So you want to be aware that people have been through stuff, that somebody said something, somebody broke up with them, somebody dismissed them, some college official said something ignorant, and they're suffering from that. And
right.
So when you get people, if you see anyone attacking you see people out now, this is my right to take off my mask. This is my freedom. And you just want to go, well, what about the speed limits? Is that infringing on your rights? And the white lines where we're supposed to drive? But, you could argue with them, but people are activated, and whatever it is that they're on about are the clues to what's underneath for them.
Right. Okay.
And just deal with your own stuff and get that right. So,
well, that's
right.
great, Rick. Very, very positive, inspiring for me. I hope for everyone else. So thanks so much for being here and sharing your expertise. It was a great time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I love it. Because I know we get to change lives together. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And thanks to all of the attendees for listening in. Please join us next Tuesday when Dr. Mark Stein will talk about sleep solutions for the ADHD brain. Thanks, everyone, for being here, and have a great day.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
If you're in business, you probably have a website, but can your site handle your growth? How many visitors before your site slows down or crashes? What about storage and data security? From web hosting to virtual servers, Pair Networks provides the online infrastructure you need to start, grow, and flourish. When it comes to security and updates, don't worry, we've got you covered. Our 24/7 US-based customer support is the best in the industry. No frustrating chatbots or sitting on hold for hours. Check out pair.com today to learn more. That's PAIR.com.